Leadership. It's a topic that has had lots of ink spilled. Books, magazines, articles, seminars, courses, classes. What does it take to be a great leader? Well, in this week's Torah portion, God gives us a nugget, a little bit of wisdom as to one of the key qualities of leadership. And he talks about one of the greatest leaders of all time, a man named Yehoshua, Joshua. Now, the portion's all about Moses. He's the centerpiece. But in one half verse, tucked away in the corner, is a little nugget that contains an enormous amount of wisdom. All right, let's jump in. The background: Jews sin with the golden calf. As a result, God distances from them until they reconcile. Now, God, therefore, Moses, in order to speak to God, has to leave the Jewish camp. So he sets up his tent outside the camp. And he goes out, speaks to God, and when he's done, he comes back. And when he comes back, the place goes crazy. They see Moses, right? They stand for him. And the Torah is describing this. And in this description of Moses leaving and coming, and God talking to Moses in the tent, it adds a little half line that says, Umisharso, his attendant, Yeshua ben Nun Na'ar. Yeshua ben Nun the Nar, Lo Yamish Mitochel, never leaves the Ohel. So Moses goes back. You know who's left? Joshua. The Nar, the boy. The attendant Joshua, a Nar is a boy. The attendant Joshua, the boy, never left the tent. Now, what's the problem? As the Ibn Ezra points out, the problem is that Joshua is not a boy. He's 56 years old. Not only that, I mean, like, if you think about it, like, you know, a few weeks earlier, they fought the first ever battle against Amalek, and guess who led them in battle? It was Yoshua. He was a war hero. And a little bit from now, Moses is going to choose 10 people to represent the Jewish people to go check out the land of Israel. Guess who's representing his tribe? Yoshua. He's a leader. He's a war hero. He's a Talmid Chacham. He's a righteous man. He's not he's not a boy. He's a rising star. The Torah calls him a boy? That's not nice. It's a little disparaging. Why would the Torah throw the word in for? So many times in life when you look at leaders, if you look closely, you'll find that there's one characteristic that separates them. There are a lot of different things that make leadership, but I want to today zero in on one. And if you look closely, you can see it. You can almost smell it. Nobody grows in life without being a receiver, without receiving from others. It doesn't work that way. When you go to school, when you live in life, when you're with your family, when you're at work, in order to grow at any level of leadership, to gain any level of wisdom, you have to receive from somebody. You have to get it. Even if it's from a book, you have to receive it. And so if you really look at people that have grown to leadership, usually in the process of their growth, they're receiving from others. But sometimes what happens with certain leaders is that as they grow in stature, they start becoming givers, influencers. They're the ones that are teaching, that are leading, that are managing. And that muscle of receiving, that muscle of the humility of I don't know, that muscle of there's someone greater than me starts to atrophy. They've spent so much time being the one giving, the center, that they almost forget what it's like to put their head down and receive. And so as they grow to levels of grandeur and stature, you can almost sense that they've lost their ability to receive, to learn from anybody, to appreciate those that are not like them, to be humble, to say they don't know. This week's Torah portion, God is giving us an insight on what it means to be a real Jewish leader. Joshua really was the first leader that took over from a leader. Moses was the greatest of all time, but he was number one. The tradition passed on with Joshua. The Torah says something amazing. Joshua, at the time, was 56 years old. He had achieved an incredible amount Umisharso, the attendant of Moshe. That's a compliment. To be Moses' number two, to be the CEO of Moshe, is an amazing thing. Yoshua ben Nun. Nar. Nar is a boy. It's not a high quality. It shows humility. It shows a person in his receiving stages. It shows being a receiver. And it teaches us that as great as Yoshua was, when it came to Moshe, he never stopped being a nar. He always remembered to put his head down. He was always humble. He learned how to learn. He taught and learned. He gave and received. He led and followed. See, that's what it means to be a Jewish leader. There's always someone that you put your head down to. There's always someone you ask your questions to. There's always someone you have in your life that you're able to learn from. Because at the end of the day, we know that it all comes from God. It's humility, real humility, that is the greatest asset of the leader. And this week, God shows us a little bit about the next leader, Joshua, and maybe throughout all of his greatness, saying no to the spies and leading into Israel and doing all the great things he did. Maybe his greatest trait was that as great as he became, he never stopped being that servant. He never lost his humility.